have seen an end of all perfection, but thy commandment is exceeding broad. Oh, how I love thy law. It is my meditation all the day. Thou through thy commandments hast made me wiser than mine enemies, for they are ever with me. I have more under.
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. I learned a new pro tip yesterday. When I was doing my streaming, and that's said sarcastically and meant to be humorous, pro tip. But when you're live streaming and you click on the Go Live button, make sure it changes to the End Stream button before you click away, because it's touchy like that. And so yesterday's Bible study was not streamed live. It was just recorded live by someone who thought he was streaming. Anyways, so we'd finished Psalm 24. We began Psalm 25. We just got a couple verses into it. We noted the acrostic structure of Psalm 25. Acrostic structure, what's that? Acrostic structure looks like this. They even note it in Bible Hub. You'll notice that each verse, each verse, they divided along the verses, begins with a different, this Hebrew letter here, you may be like, what's that symbol? That's the Hebrew letter. We have the Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Daleth, probably Heth. I forget exactly. That one looks like the Yav or the Vav, but it's this is but whatever. That's the and so on. So that's the structure. There's nothing, I talked about, it forces you into a kind of a particular writing style. And as you read the psalm, I feel like I can feel the constraint the author has put on themselves. And I can feel it. I can't notice it because it's in Hebrew. And I don't know, even though each verse begins with the next letter of the alphabet, it doesn't come across in English at all. But it's not important that it does. It's not the most. What have I done? Look at that. What a mess. How about that? It's funny that I leave it up on that page. Should be on that page. All right. So it said, "Oh Lord, I lift up my soul. I trust in Thee. Let me be not ashamed. Let not my enemies triumph over me. God forbid. Yea, let none that wait on Thee be ashamed. Let them be ashamed which transgress without cause." We talked about that briefly at the end of the study, that transgressing without a cause. Every transgression has some cause. Every action has a reaction, or no. Everything that happens in time is caused by something else, But of course, what it means is a justifiable, righteous cause. That's the implication. Because for righteousness' sake, people do things which are transgressive, meaning for the individual. Meaning you could have someone's freedom taken away because they broke the law. So, it's not without a cause that they transgress on that man's freedom, because he has committed some crime worthy of incarceration, perhaps. Point is that we want to. The point is that the from the perspective of the wicked, it's like a transgression, but it's sort of a metaphorical thing. They transgress without a cause. Obviously, the idea of transgression with cause is kind of not really, like if you did something and it's right, it's just right. I think it's meant as an emphasis. They don't just transgress against me. Here's another way of looking at it. Someone might transgress against me because I'm a bad person. Maybe I'm bad, right? And so they do something bad to me because people do that. Let's say I'm a jerk and then people start conspiring against me and they arrange for me to get embarrassed or some sort of, there's all kinds of ways people can transgress against other people, right? And it's because what? Because they have some cause against me. But then imagine people just, there's no reason. They just pick on you. That's like random violence, there's no cause. But one thing I murdered his brother, so he murdered my brother. That's transgression with cause. Maybe not a righteous cause, but it's a cause. There's some, at least you could trace their transgression back to some reason. You know what I mean? Well, I know why they did that to me, because they hate me because I did this. And there's some comfort in that. It's like, well, I guess, you might be angry, but at least you could say, I understand why this is happening. I understand why this is happening. They hate me. And I know why they hate me. Because I've transgressed against them. Show me thy ways, O Lord. Teach me thy paths. Lead me in thy truth, and teach me. For thou art the God of my salvation. On thee do I wait all the day. Remember, O Lord, thy tender mercies and thy loving kindness, for they have been ever of old. Remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. According to thy mercy, remember thou me for thy goodness' sake, O Lord. So that's good. So after this initial plea for, I describe this in terms of mercy, and he mentions it more. None that wait on thee, none that, that wait. What does it mean to wait on the Lord? Well, oftentimes it meant to wait for the Lord to act, or to look to God for a word. I will not do anything till I hear from God. And so, I need God to show me his ways. What are the ways of the Lord? What are the right ways? Show them to me. Teach me. God has ways and paths, like the way he would like us to live, the way we ought to live, right? And it's not so easy to do if you don't even know them, how are you going to be able to do them? How am I going to be able to do the way of the Lord if I don't know the way of the Lord? And it's an interesting question too, because what the way of the Lord is means different things to different people. For example, some people, their conceptualization of the way of the Lord has to do with the outward appearance. They wear certain clothes, eat and drink certain foods, rest on particular days. They follow carnal commandments. That was prevalent in the day of Jesus. There are people even at this time who look to the outward commandments to set themselves apart as God's people. They will there are people who are born Gentiles who will wear tassels on their garments and wear phylacteries because they think they should follow the Old Testament law. It's an interesting movement. They call it Hebrew roots. I don't know if that's official or if by using that I'm sort of like lumping together people who maybe don't belong together. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with it. I've had Hebrew roots people contact me over time about some issue, because they often find themselves, if they run into Arnold Murray on the TV, they can sometimes run into me, because obviously I'm an outspoken critic of Arnold Murray. And I've had conversations with them about the law and what they think. Several lengthy conversations, which was interesting to me, because I'm curious. There's a lot of people I'd like to talk to, because I could learn. I'd like to understand why they think what they think. I'd like to hear their reasons. Anyways, God's way, his true way, is not about... there's an outward component, obviously. All the sins that man commits outwardly begin inwardly. That's one of the things that Jesus taught. Out of the heart of man proceed adulteries, fornication, murders, lust, thieving. It's out of the heart. Because that's where everything begins. It begins with a human decision internally to do something that is wrong, to transgress the right way. God's ways are right? And we kind of know what they are, right? But if it is something like put a tassel on your garment and, observe this feast and then go at this time and do this particular ritual. If it's that, then we definitely need to be told, right? We know right from wrong, right? Or so we think, right? But there is a more excellent way of righteousness than maybe the right and wrong we instinctively know. There's even, there are better ways to be. It's one of the things about the law of Christ, is that it goes beyond the simple thou shalt not and thou shalt commandments of the Old Testament, and goes into a deeper aspect of righteousness, where it's not just do you conform to the letter of the law, but he looks inwardly to the heart of the man. And our hearts are judged. It's not just what we do outwardly. Our intentions do matter. Now, that is not to say that just having good intentions excuses things, because I've warned about that. It's certainly true that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, at least in a metaphorical story time sense. That's a true story. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's true. In meaning that it has multiple meanings in my mind. Is one, you can mean well but end up in a bad place. Two, you can mean well but take everyone else to a bad place. You see that a lot in politics, because I think most politicians kind of think they're doing well. They're kind of trying to do well. They're trying to pass laws that are better for the country and better for everyone overall. I certainly can't think of any specific examples of people in modern times, certainly, who do not. Look back at even in the Revolutionary War, let's say Benedict Arnold, famous traitor, right? His name, when I was growing up, was synonymous with traitorousness. You Benedict Arnold? That's funny that it exists. But he betrayed his country, but he thought, but he had reasons and thoughts, and he thought he was doing the better thing. People rarely are just crassly doing the thing they think is wrong. Sometimes people do things they know that are wrong, though. That's truly sinful. That's truly wicked, especially when it hurts other people. Teach me thy paths. God has paths. I need to learn them. It's not just thou shalt not kill. It's whoever's angry with his brother without a cause is in danger of the judgment. Whoever shall say to his brother, Raka, is in danger of hellfire. That's a significant change in the law. And that's something I have to be shown. I think I know in myself it's not right to speak, let's just say, disrespectfully, or that's good enough. I could say hatefully, or to speak in anger, to a fellow human being. It depends. It can, I mean, there can, what it is it's touchy. It's not as obvious as "thou shalt not kill." Even that is not obvious, right? Thou shalt not kill. I've my whole life I've watched people debate. My teachers were like, "Thou shalt do no murder," right? Meaning that "thou shalt not kill" means you will not murder someone. It doesn't mean there's never a cause for killing. I mean, even in the fact that the thing doesn't mention "thou shalt not kill another human being." Isn't that interesting? I mean, you ever think about that? It just says "thou shalt not kill." It's like, well, you won't kill insects, and as you walk through life, you won't, accidentally swallow a fly once in a while. You won't, inadvertently kill, or just of necessity kill an animal to survive for food. Obviously, it's referring. So what I'm saying is, there's already more to it. Thou shalt not kill there's already more to it. It's not just thou shalt not kill. It's thou shalt not kill a man. And then there are times when the law calls for the men to be executed for particularly wicked transgressions. Some people have used "thou shalt not kill" to argue against the death penalty. Personally, I think the death penalty is fine. It's just the legal system, and I've said this for years, the legal system, I don't trust it to arrive at, I think the thought of an innocent person being executed is so repulsive that until we find a way to improve the system by which we bring people to execution, I don't think we should do it, because the system is so large and stuff. Is like people can just get swallowed up, and their lives can be snuffed out by a system that's supposed to be designed to bring about justice. So I definitely understand that. But so it's a complicated issue, "thou shalt not kill." So the ways of the Lord are deeper than we realize. Sometimes we don't realize how deep they go. We have to be instructed, and God can instruct us, not just through His Word, but through His Spirit being in us, and in a given situation, helping us understand and to know what the right thing to do is. I've had plenty of situations in life where I didn't know what was right. I couldn't tell the right thing to do in the situation. What should I do? There was competing interests. It's like weighing the interests of my family versus the interests of a stranger, weighing the interests of friends versus the interests of other people. It's complicated. Sometimes. Thankfully, most sin and righteousness is not. You know what I mean? But I do think perfection, as you get closer and closer to perfection, it gets harder and harder to do the perfect thing. You know what I mean? It's hard. I mean, as you proceed towards perfection, I'm not talking about big, gross, grotesque, meaning writ large type sins, which are very easy to understand. The commandments of God are not difficult, but there is a subtle nuance of righteousness which is not so easily obtained. But God must instruct us in it. Lead me in thy truth. I need you to lead me in your truth. I think I know the truth, I think I know the truth. Oh, this is what the scripture teaches. I know. I've been doing it for 25 years plus, 30 years almost. What is it? 2020. So 30 years ago was 1990. Not quite 20 years. No. 30 years. No. Because I was a bit young then. But it's getting there. Just a bit longer. It'd be, 2-3 more years. But that doesn't mean I know the truth, because I've been long time I tell you what, I've seen plenty of guys who've studied the Bible longer and harder. The funny thing is, there are so many people who study the Bible longer and harder, and they don't all agree with each other. That's kind of depressing, you know? That is kind of depressing. You know, the people we don't get it. Obviously, we don't get it because we keep coming up with different answers. I've come up with different answers than other people. Not to every question, but I mean, there's enough difference to be like, wow, that's different. I wish I would come up with the same. I would. I wish I constantly reformed my beliefs in Christianity to conform. I wish as I reformed them in good conscience, they'd become more and more like the mainstream beliefs everybody else had. And you know, the funny thing is, there is some of that. Some of my beliefs, as I continue to study the scriptures, I was like, okay, now I understand. I guess that's right. A good example of that would be like the Trinity, where I'm like, I guess that's right. I guess that's right. It's certainly the best explanation. You know, we don't have a perfect explanation because we don't perfectly understand God. That makes sense. But there's so many other things like that, you know, like what happens when you die? You know, things where I could not agree with what most people think. And there are other people who don't agree with what most people think or with me. On so many doctrines, I mean, on things like the Trinity, you have all kinds of people who've been studying the Bible a long time come up with a lot of different answers. And part of me wants to just say, like, well, you know, the way they read the scriptures, and I've said this before, but I think about it now and I'm like, I don't know if I'm being incredibly uncharitable. Because, you know, if God does not reveal the truth to me, I'm not going to know it either. No amount of studying it is going to give it to me. And maybe I'm already shut out on there's some things I don't know, obviously. And I don't mean things I don't know because I haven't learned. I think things that I don't know because God has not revealed them to me. He hasn't suffered me to see them. Lead me in thy truth and teach me, for thou art the God of my salvation. On thee do I wait all the day. I will wait on the Lord. What does that mean? Well, it's interesting we use that word wait in English. I wonder what it is in Hebrew. I guess I'm sort of tempted. I think we'll go look at it. I'm just curious what their word is, because I'm going to go into our word wait and all the different ways it comes up in the language. But there's the first one, wait. Gava. All right, and where's the next one? I wait all the day. Same word. Both verses, same word. And it means to wait for. Well, probably originally to twist, stretch, then of tension, of enduring, waiting. Stretch, twist to stretch or stretch out time. That's another one I like. Gather together, look patiently, tarry, wait for, or on, or upon. A primitive verb to bind together, perhaps by twisting, that is, collectively, figuratively, to expect. You see the words here, it's translated gather, look patiently, tarry, wait for, on, or upon. Okay, so it seems basically like our word. And I was just thinking how that, you know, waiters and waitresses, they have the word wait in their name, a waiter. They wait on the table. They serve, it means service, right? There's an indication, like, they also call waiters servers, do they not? They serve the food. But they also serve the customer is really I think the meaning. And they wait on the customer. What does that mean? Oh, waiter, blah, 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 blah. They're supposed to be paying attention to you. And so when you put your hand, you go, waiter, please, could we have some more rolls over here? Waiter, we'd like some appetizers. Waiter, we could use some more drinks. And they're supposed to be paying attention to their tables and ready to serve if you have any needs. If you need something, call the waiter. They come and they get it. That's all they do. That's their entire job. You know? We and generally we try to treat those people nicely and stuff. I do because they're going to handle my food. I'm going to be nice to them. You know? They're the last person that touches the food before me. Sort of like the police. Don't mess with them, man. They can hurt you. Anyways, so I like the idea of a waiter. And then also when you apply it to I will wait upon the Lord. Wait upon, in this context, I believe means as in service. You know what I mean? Like they have ladies in waiting and stuff like that, right? And it means people who are just around, and their job is literally to wait for someone to tell them to do something or to ask something of them. That's their primary job. They wait for the word of the king, for the word of the master, for the word of the Lord. So that's what I will wait upon the Lord means. That it's like I am. It doesn't mean I'm just not doing anything. Of course I'm doing things, but my primary job, aside from whatever else I'm doing, is to wait on God. If there's any little thing the Lord would like to tell me, any little command he'd like to give me, I want to be ready to receive that and to do it. Because I'm waiting for his command. I'm waiting for him to intercede. I'm waiting for him to show me at any moment what I ought to do, or if he needs me to do something, you know? I think about when Paul talked about doors of utterance being opened. We also are like this in the gospel. Like, you should be looking for opportunities to serve Christ through preaching the gospel. I mean, you don't have to be nuts about it, but what I'm saying is, like, when a door obviously opens in front of you, go on and step right through. Step right through. You got a space opening, take it. Take that opening. And do what God has commanded. I wait on you all the day, Lord. I'm just waiting for you to tell me to do something. If you want something from me, I'm ready to do it at all times. I am ready to do it at all times. There's nothing I'm doing that's so important that I won't drop it because I'm waiting on you first and foremost. Above all else, I am waiting for you. You are the God of my salvation. God is the one who saves us. So, we ought to pay attention to what he says. Remember, O Lord, thy tender mercies and thy loving kindness, for they have been ever of old. Your mercy is like this ever thing. That's why when people say we're in the age of grace, I'm not a dispensationalist. Things have changed, but to be fair, I never considered it too much because I just didn't like certain directions dispensationalism was going. And I looked at the scriptures and I'm like, these scriptures create the possibility, but they've made a mountain out of a molehill, in my opinion. They've taken a few verses that talk about, oikonomia, or dispensation, which is simply literally a distributorship. And they've converted it into something that Paul does not describe. So I'm not a dispensationalist. And I don't mean to offend anyone who is. I'm just not. Though I believe a lot of the things they do. I do believe God at different times has sort of like different... But there are moments. There are epochs and moments in which God is let's say, interacting with man in a particular mode or something like that. But I don't... And the thing is, like I said, I don't know enough about dispensationalism to really... I just know that it has something to do... they talk about... I just don't like when they get into like, oh yes, this is the age of grace. At the end of this, there comes the rapture, and then comes God's going to judge people differently at that time. And there is differences in judgment depending on when you get judged. You know what I mean? There's different, obviously, like, I was talking to someone the other day about someone I know who left his family to go live with someone for an adultery, and that didn't work out for him, and then he left that, and kind of was lost for a while, but then he got married again. Someone new this time, and I thought things had turned around for him, and then he got cancer and died. But it would be different at the time. I remember talking to him and thinking he was turning his life around, and in some ways he did, but he still died. But it would have been different, I suppose, if he died while he was in the bed of adultery. I don't know. I certainly would think that was a heavy judgment. If God killed me in the midst of some grave sin, I would think, oh boy, I don't want to stand before him. I want to finish out my life with a greater and greater level of obedience. I don't want to be caught in the midst of maybe making the worst mistake of my life. And so people who are otherwise, I don't, when it gets into talking about God's judgment, and the tribulation, and people who are, they seem to be Christians now, right? And I've been watching, the pandemic and all that stuff, right? Interesting experiment. To me, I've learned so much about the society I live in from these events, more than I learned about many other things. I mean, one of the things I learned about, the most important things I've learned were about society and how completely domesticated we've become, and how completely people, how just that, people wonder. There was a book, I remember I think it was called Ordinary Men. I never got to read it, but I heard about it, and I'd like to read it if there was an audiobook version. There probably is. I just never hunted it down. It was called Ordinary Men. It was how these men, they were just policemen from some small town in Germany in World War II, and how they were transformed from just kind of regular people to a death squad, basically, going around and just executing all these people. They're executing women and children, and putting the bullet in the back of their head. How a little bit at a time, increment at a time, how they were turned from ordinary men into killers. Killers for the state. One thing I've learned about through the pandemic is I'm surrounded by people who would be willing killers for the state. That's what I'm surrounded with. Not in my home, but I'm just in the world. I go out and I'm like, yeah, everyone is going to do what they're told. And I think on some level, we are worse than we've ever been. And I know why. Why have humans become so, I think we always were somewhat, because people love peace. They want, they just want to go home. I think I talked about this. They just want to go home and, take their shoes off, put on something funny, laugh, drink a couple beers, go to sleep, get up in the morning and go back to work. And they just want to live their lives simply, and they want to enjoy them simply. They want to have their once-a-year vacation. If people go on vacation once a year, and they have their daily necessities met, and they can watch their favorite shows, movies, whatever, they are quite happy and quite content, and will, and also are willing to do extraordinarily wicked things to support the system. Because it's a weird thing, because like the system almost is like undefined, yet it defines everything. And I mean the government system. I just mean the way things work in the world, the way our minds interface with the reality around us, the television, the internet, the way we interface, and people just want to go back to normal. And whatever path they think will get them to normal, they will take. And I guess I have a kind of dark view of seeing this. The total lack of resistance on many things, or the very minimal lack of resistance. I'm like, boy, man. Because someone was asking me, like, why are you so upset about this? I mean, they've been taking away our rights for years. It's like, you could say that. I talked about, people always make this boiling frog analogy, right? If they turn up the temperature slowly on a frog in a pot of water, if you turn up the temperature slowly, the story goes that the frog won't notice that it's getting hotter if you turn the temperature up real slow. I've never tried this, I've done a lot of bad things to frogs in my time, but I never tried boiling one by slowly heating it. All right. So maybe that's true. If you turn up the heat slowly enough, people are like frogs. They'll just sit there and take incremental changes without complaint if they happen slowly enough. And I see the point in that. That's true. People will do that. But there's also the fact that what if the temperature just suddenly jumps 40 degrees and the frog doesn't jump? You know what I mean? What's wrong with that frog? Why isn't he jumping? It just jumped 40 degrees. 40 degrees, it's a big difference. Imagine temperature goes from let's say 50 to 90. It's a big jump. You notice the difference between 50 and 90. I feel like we had the pandemic, and it was like we went from 50 to 90, and people still didn't jump. I jumped. And I'm like, what? Why isn't everybody, plenty of people jumped, right? But so many people didn't that it lets you know it's like, yeah, people haven't learned their lesson. Like, we are ready to walk into George Orwell's 1984. We are ready, willing, and able to walk into that world. And we have the people all around us to help make it possible, Oh, yes, we can make that world possible. We want to live in a nightmare world? We have the people who will help bring it to us through their apathy and through their contentment and through their fatness. Yeah. They're not hungry, and they don't want to be hungry. It's funny I got into all that, but it's like the whole point was about your mercies were of old. God's mercy. I've always said, not what am I saying? I hate when I say that because I haven't always said hardly anything. But one of the things I've said a lot in the past several years is that under the Old Testament law, because these are things I think about, like how does sacrifice work? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like how people explain blood, and I'm like, okay, but wait, what's at the bottom of that? Meaning, there are like, if I say, how does a television work? There's a couple answers. Or here's another good example. I remember that I can't remember his name now. Irish gentleman. I enjoy, gray hair, kind of overweight, nice guy. Excellent debater, always debating the atheists. He's like, the Irish accent and whatever. I forget his name. But one of the things he would talk about, one of the things he said I was trying to think of him now. I can't remember what I was trying to get out of what he said. I hate when I do that. It's like the most embarrassing thing I do. Introduce a subject that doesn't seem connected and then forget why I was trying to connect it. Oh, it was just something he said about those things. And what was I talking about? It was where you can yell. I'll just start talking about what I was talking about before again. Maybe it'll occur to me. But, how sacrifice works. And why did I bring up him? Well, whatever. I'm just going to go. I'm going to try to. Maybe it'll come to me why I brought that up. Basically, we have. Why him? That's interesting. Well, there's materialist reasons things happen sometimes. Like, because he used this example. That's right. He talked about a car. How do you explain this car? And it's like, well, it's got steel and internal combustion, and there's like an explanation of the car that is purely mechanistic. And then he said, and then the other explanation of the car was Henry Ford. It's very simply, meaning, like, how did this car get here? I think that was his question, because he was talking about God, obviously. And, how did this car get here? One explanation is, well, you could explain all the things. There's a factory and it got made, blah, 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 blah. But there's also, like, behind it, like, this personality who started something that brought this thing into being. And he was liking that to God. Well, what I'm bringing that up for here is because we could explain sacrifice. There's a temptation to explain it in mechanistic terms, as if there is a mechanism that exists like physics, whereby when you kill an animal, somehow your deeds become like wiped out. This doesn't act. In the truth is, Paul states, or the book of Hebrews, I believe, was it Hebrews or was it Paul? Or obviously it can be both. Often I'll say Hebrews instead of Paul for Hebrews because some people dispute that he wrote it, and that's fine with me. I don't care. I'll just say the book of Hebrews says this, or the book of Thessalonians. But whatever. And what does it say? It is impossible that the blood of goats could take away sin. It's impossible. It doesn't, it doesn't really do anything. The blood of animals does not actually carry your sin off to anything. And neither does the blood of Jesus. Just in and of itself. It's because God has said, I accept this instead of that. It's because of God's mercy. And even the Old Testament sacrifices and everything God did in the Old Testament is mercy-based. Even, people look at Noah. He was a righteous man and God spared him. Lot was a righteous man and God spared him, but he wasn't that righteous. He wasn't perfect. He was perfect enough. That's how I look at Old Testament people who are described in that way. What it means is, perhaps, that any sins he may have committed were of no significance and that could not be forgiven based on a conscientious adherence to the old sacrificial ways. Meaning, with the proper gravity taken and inward, whatever, that God would accept it. God has to accept the sacrifice. You look back to Cain and Abel. He had respect unto Abel's sacrifice, but unto Cain's he had not respect. That's what made Cain angry, because God did not respect his sacrifice. Because he doesn't have to. He's not obligated. Just because you offer something doesn't mean it gets automatically accepted. God's tender mercies and loving kindness is the mechanism by which we are able to approach God, if there's a mechanism. Because he's a person, not a machine. And the universe that he has made is his creation, not his cage. You know what I mean? There is not a cage around God. But some people act as if there is. You know what I mean? Like he's constrained to do things because of that. I've heard people talk about God in terms of constraint. Like, well, he can't do that because of this. Often I'll hear it, the first thing that comes to mind is like free will. God can't do this because of free will. He can't do that because of free will. No. I mean, maybe they would properly correct that. If that was true, you'd have to say, he can't do that. He won't do that because he refuses to violate free will. Like it's his choice. It's not because he can't. He could violate free will. I mean, and not that he does, honestly. He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to violate your free will because you always do exactly what he wants, for good or evil. Meaning, the Lord Jesus knew Judas was going to betray him. I have chosen you 12, and one of you is a devil. He chose one who was a devil. He chose one who would betray him. It's not like he was surprised by that. He knew he'd betray him. He knew he was going to do it. How could he know that? Is he making him do it? Nope. Is he waiting for his free will choice, though? Then he wouldn't know. It's like, oh, shoot, Judas, you were supposed to betray me. I thought you would. I thought you might, but you chose not to. Well, how could he ever know for a certainty? Remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. According to thy mercy, remember thou me, for thy goodness' sake, O Lord. The sins of my youth. Remember not the sins of my youth. There are a lot of sins people commit in youth, because we don't know. Just like God, our parents aren't always watching. God is always watching, but but you don't always feel his presence. He's not always there. And when the parental presence isn't around, children sometimes get up to no good. I know I did as a child and as a young adult. I got up to all kinds of no good. Stuff I knew my parents didn't approve of. Stuff I knew God didn't approve of. And I was sorry for that even at the time. But I didn't know how to reconcile. I wanted to do those things because I wanted to try things that were forbidden to me. And so I did, in spite of God, in spite of my family, in spite of what I knew was right and wrong. I did what I knew to be wrong. And a lot of us, probably all of us, have done that. And especially in our youth, As you get older, you fear God more, hopefully. Hopefully you grow in the fear of God to be more mindful. I'm glad that as an older person, I don't think I need as severe chastisement from God, like from the external. I pray I don't. I don't like having bad things happen to me, And people say, well, God loves you. He wouldn't let bad things happen to you. That's true. But you see, even bad things that happen to me are good. So bad things can still happen to me. Things that I judge in the moment as bad, all right, they can happen to me, you bet. Now, God isn't letting anything actually bad happen to me. He's just letting something painful happen to me. He's just making me suffer a bit because I haven't noticed that I was sinning. So now he's got to get my attention with some pain. I'm glad as an older adult, I need that less and less because I'm more attuned to listening to my conscience and the Holy Spirit as opposed to waiting for God to strike me. Because he can. Things can happen to you that seem bad as a Christian, but they're not bad. They're just painful. You think they're bad, but they're actually good for you. Having those experiences is rough. But, God, remember not the sins of my youth, man, nor my transgressions, but according to thy mercy, remember me for the sake of your goodness. Because you're good. Don't if you remember me like, oh yeah, that's the guy I was trying to do good to. Don't remember like, oh yeah, that's the guy that sinned against me. That's the guy that transgressed against me. That's the guy who didn't listen to my word. That's the guy who willfully went out and sinned against what he knew was right. You know? For your goodness sake, because you're good. Is thy evil because I am good? The master says in the parable of the worker's wages, Matthew chapter 20. But that, that is why God does things. Because he's good. Why do some people have more than others? Because God's good. People have something. It's like, well, some have more than others. That's not, people get obsessed with this like measuring contest. Like how much do I have versus what someone else has? It's weird to me. It's really weird. I've never asked myself, why am I not a millionaire? Never asked myself that question. Why don't I make as much as a rich person? I've never had to ask myself that question. Because I know I don't do what they do to get rich. You know what I mean? You have to be disciplined. It's not just hard work, it's hard work in a certain direction. You have to be planning for that. Good and upright is the Lord, therefore he will teach sinners in the way. I wonder what they mean by that. Let's see. Good and upright is the Lord, therefore he will teach sinners in the way. The meek will he guide in judgment, the meek will he teach his way. When I say I don't know what it means, I'm just trying to understand, does it mean, I think it means he will teach sinners the way. Like I'm guiding you now in the Bible. He will teach sinners in the way. Because there's another way you could interpret that, like literally, along the way he will teach you, right? Let's go, we'll drive and in the way we will learn as we go. But I don't think that's what it's saying. I think it's really just saying he will teach sinners, instruct them in this subject, the way of the Lord, how God would have you go. You know what I mean? You come to a junction, a decision. What shall I do, this or that? Shall I yield to temptation or shall I yield my members as instruments of righteousness? Right? God, teach me which way to go. Obviously, the way I described it, it should be obvious which way to go, right? But sometimes we have decisions before us where it's not obvious which the righteous path is, right? It's not always obvious. But even if it is, we can be astray from the way. We can be not following it. It's not always due to sort of wicked rebelliousness, but just, I don't know. Probably, I could chalk some of it up to a lack of faith. If I had more perfect faith, right, I would be more obedient to God because I would have I would have a better sense of the immediacy of God. You know what I mean? I don't feel like God's standing over my shoulder watching my every move, right? But for all intents and purposes, he's doing much more than that. He's like actually in me, around me. He's watching me yesterday and he's watching me tomorrow already. And that's that's something that's oddly, like we most of us really believe that, right? As Christians, we believe God sees all and he knows all, right? He reads my mind. He doesn't have to read my mind. He already knows what it's thinking before he think. He doesn't need to read the mind. He just knows it. He's the author of it. So, if this is the case, how could I ever transgress against him? He's right there. Because I don't feel his immediacy. I don't feel like him just there on top of me. Even though it's true. I mean, he's every bit, especially because I have the Holy Spirit. I know he's seeing out of my head. He will teach sinners. He will teach the meek. The meek will he guide in judgment. The meek will he teach his ways. You know, Jesus saying things about the meek. The happy are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, right? We talked about meekness, and in Hebrew, we had this word a couple of Psalms ago, and we discovered that it means similar. It has similar meaning to the word we use in Greek, and the English word is sometimes, I think, we don't understand what meekness is. And let me let's see, the meek. Yeah, on poor afflicted. I'll bring it up. I'll just check something here. Depressed. Yeah. Lowly. Humble, lowly. Depressed also means like restrained. In mind, gentle. Or in circumstances, needy, especially saintly. Yeah, this is a positively, it says depressed, but that's usually the strict meaning of the word. Whatever. Anyways, it means essentially the same thing you'd find in the New Testament. The idea of meekness is not, people often confuse the quality of meekness, which is restrained behavior. Not, like, for example, someone knocks your hat off. Well, the most unrestrained thing to do would be punch them in the face right then. Sometimes people do stuff like that. Someone knocks off your hat, bam, fight, right? It happens all the time. Then there's like, he knocks it over, and I don't punch him in the face, But sometimes, like, you don't pinch, let's say I bend over and pick up the hat. That is a meek response, and can be seen by some people as cowardly or as weak. But meekness is not itself weakness, though can be easily mistaken for weakness. In fact, meekness is not meaningful, really, if you're weak. If you're weak, you're not meek, you're just weak. You know what I mean? Because meek implies there's something more that you could do or would do, but don't do for the sake of restraint, for the sake of self-control. So meekness should not be confused with weakness. That's what I want to emphasize over and over again. Jesus Christ was not weak, but he was meek. He did not avail himself with every possible, like to take every opportunity to benefit yourself, or to defend yourself, or to, nothing wrong with standing up for. I think it's a different thing, actually. Standing up for your rights is different than standing up for yourself. It's not necessarily sometimes your rights you stand up for. You stand up for the rights of all men. You know what I mean? Like by claiming and exerting your right, you are also securing that right for other people when you're successful. When you successfully are able to pull it off. If you want to be guided in judgment, you gotta have a meek outlook on things. You can't be, loud and obnoxious and violent, which would be kind of the opposite of meekness: loud, obnoxious, and violent. We have to be able to listen. We have to be able to receive the truth. We have to be able to receive God's judgment. And be restrained also, because God is restrained. That's the thing. God, right? It says, remember thy tender mercies and thy loving kindness. Don't remember my sins. God could just burn me down for my sins, really, at any time. At any time, he could just burn me down for everything I've done. He could say, Paul, you know what? I let it go, but, I've decided no more. It's time to pay up. And he'd be justified. I'm not saying he's going to do that to me necessarily. I don't know what his plans for me are, but I have the blood of Christ on me, and therefore I trust that he has forgiven me. Nevertheless, that doesn't mean I can't be made an example. That doesn't mean I can't have an instructive experience that's painful or that seems bad. All the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth unto such as keep his covenant and his testimonies. If you keep his testimonies and his covenant, the paths of the Lord are mercy and truth. You know what I mean? Some people think the commandments of God are grievous. They're too hard. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be, some people despise marriage. They don't want to have to be married to one woman for their entire life. It's most of those people, the funny thing is, marriage is despised by a lot of people who've never really tried it. You know what I mean? Problem with marriage, though, it's hard to really try it because the best part comes late into the experience. Though I have hundreds of fond memories of my early days. It's like I can't compare the early days to what it's like 25 years later in a very close relationship. When you're really close with somebody, it just is better long term. And people, that you never. I couldn't have told you that the way I can tell you that now 20 years ago. I just didn't know. You know what I mean? I was married. I was going to stay married. I was happy. I was going to stay happy. But I didn't realize how much better things could get. The Lord is good. If you keep his covenant, his testimonies, there's a new covenant. There's a new testimony. The New Testament. Right? We have the testimony of Jesus. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. We've got a testimony. We've got a covenant. And God's paths along that are mercy and truth unto us. And you notice how, this psalm, like I said, because of the acrostic structure, don't you feel it? Don't you feel like the difference between a lot of the other psalms where you felt the connection of the verses? They connected thought-wise, whereas these are connected letter-wise. And there are thoughts that go together, but there's a certain disjointedness that is brought to it by having to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, even though some of those letters don't exist in Hebrew. What man is he that feareth the Lord? He shall teach the way that is, he shall choose. We're done today. We've gone over an hour. Okay. For thy name's sake, pardon. Okay, we'll begin at verse 11 on Monday. Thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to being back Monday to continue these line-by-line Bible studies. They are always a great pleasure to me, and I hope they bring some good thing also to you. And so, there we go, finally. Until tomorrow. Or until Monday, I mean.
I have seen an end of all perfection, but thy commandment is exceeding broad. Oh, how I love thy law. It is my meditation all the day. Thou through thy commandments hast made me wiser than mine enemies, for they are ever have seen